Well, hey there, kiddos. Tonight we are going to talk a little bit about parallel and perpendicular lines, which we have discussed a little. We've at least talked about their slopes, but now we're going to talk about writing equations of them. So let's do a quick, brief little review of what we know. Okay, so what do I know about the slopes of parallel lines? Hopefully you remember that parallel lines always have the same slope. So if any two lines have identical slope, that makes them automatically parallel. Perpendicular lines have what we call opposite reciprocal slopes. And y'all will remember this from the video over parallel and perpendicular that we did before. Opposite reciprocal slopes, you got to remember to flip and change the sign. I mean, it has to happen. And so if you want to check to see if lines are perpendicular, you multiply their slopes, and the product is going to be -1. So if you multiply the slopes of perpendicular lines, you'll always get -1, and it's because they are opposite reciprocals. So let's practice this. Good news is everything we do today is going to be in slope-intercept form instead of standard form, so it makes this just a little bit shorter. So you're supposed to write an equation in slope-intercept form for a line that passes through this point, 4, -8, and is parallel to this line. The fact that it's parallel tells me their slopes have to be the same. Well, so the first thing I have to do is find the slope of this line. Well, this is written in standard form, so I have to change it to slope-intercept form so I can find the slope. So I got to get y by itself. So the first thing I will do is subtract 4x from both sides. So I end up with -y equals -4x minus 5. And because this is a negative y, we can't have a y be negative. I need to divide everything by -1 or change all my signs. So it becomes y equals positive 4x plus 5. And from here, I can now identify that the slope is 4 because that's the number in front of the x. Well, if the slope of this line is 4, then the slope of a line parallel to it will also be 4. So here is the slope I need to use. This is my slope. A parallel, this is the symbol for parallel slope, is going to be 4. So now I go to my point slope form, which it feels like we have been using forever, and I plug in what I know. So I have y minus y1, which happens to be -8, so I end up with y plus 8. My parallel slope is 4 times x minus 4. We get to distribute. So we're really good at this by now. So I end up with 4x minus 16. And then I got to get y by itself, so it's in slope-intercept form. So I'll subtract this 8. So y equals 4x minus, my apologies, 24. That is the equation of the parallel line in slope-intercept form. This line and this line, if I were to graph them on my graphing calculator, would be parallel to one another because they have the same slope. So the next one, this time, same thing, we're going to write an equation of a line that goes through this point, but this time it's perpendicular. So I have to be able to identify the slope. So from here, again, this one's not in standard form. But I do have to get y by itself. This one's not in standard form because this number in front of the x is negative. But I still want to get y by itself. So I'm going to start by adding x to both sides. So I get 3y equals x plus 6. And then I have to divide everything by 3 so that the y is by itself. Well, there's an invisible 1 here, so this becomes 1/3 x plus 6 divided by 3 is 2. So the slope of this line right here is 1/3, but the slope of a line perpendicular to that, remember this is my symbol for perpendicular, I'm going to have to flip and change the sign. So I'm going to have to flip it and change its sign. So this is my perpendicular slope. I flipped this and I changed the sign. So now instead of positive, I have a negative, and they're reciprocal. So this is the slope I want to use. So I go back to this point slope form that I've been using forever. So I end up with y minus 1 from my point. My perpendicular slope is -3 times x plus 3, because that would be a minus -3. So now I get to do distributive property. So I have y minus 1 equals -3x minus 9. And so to get slope-intercept form, I'm going to add this 1 to both sides. So I end up with y equals -3x minus 8. This line will be perpendicular to the original line because their slopes are opposite reciprocals, and you can check them. 1/3 times -3/1 becomes -3/3, which is -1. So it checks out. They really are perpendicular. So again, point slope form. Find the slope, plug in the point, plug in the slope, do the math. So let's check a couple of other examples. These are gimme questions, okay? Gimme questions are questions that you should not miss because they are easy and obvious, but you have got to train yourself to recognize that this is easy and obvious. So I want an equation of a line that passes through this point, -2, 3, and is perpendicular to y equals -5. Well, what I know about y equals -5 is that it is a horizontal line because this HOI tells me so. Horizontal lines have 0 slope and their equations are y equals. Since this is y equals with no x, this thing is horizontal. So I know that this is a horizontal line, and the only way to have something perpendicular to a horizontal line is for it to be a vertical line. So I need a vertical line that's going to cross this through this point. Well, vertical lines, here's our little acronym for that. Vertical lines, I have undefined slope, so I can't just, write it in point slope form because I don't have a slope. But their equations are always x equals. Well, if I look at my point right here, x equals -2. So the line that is perpendicular to y equals -5 is x equals -2. And I just pulled that straight from the point. That is all the math you have to do. That is why these are gimme questions. It's a horizontal line. Perpendicular has to be vertical. All you got to do is look at the point and pull out the number. This next one is also a gimme question. We want an equation of a line that goes through this point, 4, -2, but this time it's parallel to y equals -7. Well, again, y equals -7 is a horizontal line. If I want a line to be parallel to that, it also has to be horizontal. In order for it to be horizontal, its equation also has to be y equals. So I get to go over here to my point. Looky here, y equals -2. This line is parallel to this line. They have the same slope because they are both horizontal lines. Okay? So those are gimme questions. You've got to get really good at recognizing those gimme questions because they're questions that you should automatically get quick, easy, fast, and you shouldn't get them wrong. So start training yourself to recognize those gimme questions. Horizontal and vertical lines should always be gimmes.